With the release of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, Disney not only brings an end to their Star Wars sequel trilogy, but also to the 42-year-long Skywalker saga. The movie also marks the 11th theatrically released live-action Star Wars film to hit cinemas, including Disney's 2 spin-off films. And to celebrate, I plan to rank all 11 in order of my own personal favourite, from worst to best. Please note, I will not be including any animated films, TV movies, specials, or series. As this is a personal ranking, it's simply a reflection of my own opinions, and is likely to be vastly different to yours. With that, I welcome all opinions from all fans, and would love you to weigh in with your own rankings down below in the comments, but as always, I must stress, perhaps more than ever, please remember to be respectful. Also, if you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button, as it does wonders in getting my content out there. At that, let's get into it. Kicking us off at number 11, Attack of the Clones. I don't hate any of the Star Wars movies, but Attack of the Clones is the closest I'll get to disliking any of them. Clones features a slow-moving story, a choppy narrative, an overabundance of CGI, and a plethora of terrible performances. I don't blame bad acting on the actors. Clones simply shows George Lucas's inability to write good dialogue or a good screenplay in general. I love Lucas for a multitude of reasons, but his screenwriting abilities ain't one of them. The movie does feature some exciting action sequences, which are all filmed beautifully and incredibly well choreographed. I'd be lying if I said the Geonosian battle isn't a highlight of the series, right along with Yoda using a lightsaber for the first time. Clones works fairly well when watched within the context of the saga, but as a standalone piece of cinema, it's not one that I can really watch individually. You know, it's a bit like sand. It's coarse, rough, irritating. 10. Rogue One. This was absolutely mind-blowing in cinemas, but it's one that hasn't held up all that well for me on repeat viewings, maybe owed in part to its darker, more depressing tone. It's a movie I think is really fantastic, and one of the best pieces of extended Star Wars lore out there at the moment, but it's one I'm simply not as in love with as I am with the core franchise. There are great characters and wonderful performances here. Jyn Erso is an absolute favourite, but these are characters I feel you can never form a full relationship or connection with, thanks to their incomplete, fairly unsatisfying and predictable arcs. These are characters used as simple collateral to fulfill a narrative that we already knew from the outset. However, nothing can fault Rogue One for being a brutal, honest, and true war movie, with one of the greatest sequences in the entire franchise, incredible battle sequences, great drama, and real tension, even if it doesn't have the high stakes to back it all up. 9. Solo. Surprisingly, Solo managed to scrape through as a fairly decent entry considering the behind-the-scenes drama it endured. However, it's not one that I feel has held up incredibly well on repeat viewings. There are things I enjoy, such as the lead performances, all of whom I felt did a great job, and the way the movie manages to pull together threads from the prequels, originals, sequels, and extended canon, providing a conduit that helps build a more cohesive and meticulous timeline. But there are a few glaring issues that I can't get past. While I loved seeing Han and Lando's fateful Sabacc game and the Kessel Run sequence, a lot of the references and foreshadowing are highly on the nose, and many of the explanatory moments felt drastically unneeded, as did the Han-Kira romance, which I felt was really hard to invest in, knowing Han's romantic future. It's an exciting piece of bright and energetic, harmlessly inoffensive entertainment, and a movie that I have no problem with existing. It's just one I can't watch over and over again. 8. The Rise of Skywalker. Easily the safest entry in the entire Star Wars saga, a film which finds itself so desperate to be loved by its audience, much of which turned away from the franchise following its predecessor, that it completely undermines itself with overt fan service and the inability to make big, bold, brave moves, becoming nothing more than a paint-by-numbers entry and a highly predictable finale that ends exactly where many predicted it would 4 years prior. Rise of Skywalker isn't a terrible movie, but it certainly isn't a great one. There are some good things in here, certain character arcs round out nicely and satisfactorily, and it offers some of the biggest and most mind-blowing set pieces in Star Wars history, and moments we've been dying to see for years. Sadly, the films need to backtrack on everything that made The Last Jedi so divisive and so wonderful by essentially course-correcting itself into more familiar, safer territory. Almost makes this one feel like an enormous cop-out, filled with disappointing moments and ridiculously stupid narrative movements, sadly closing out the sequel trilogy and the Skywalker saga as a whole on an enormous fizzle. 7. Revenge of the Sith. Growing up with the prequels, Episode 3 was the cinematic event of my young lifetime. A movie I waited a near decade to see, and which, needless to say, absolutely blew me away on first release. While the first half hour is hard to sit through with its cringy dialogue and awful slapstick comedy, it grows to be beautifully paced and full of tension, excitement, wonderful drama, and superb character exploration. It's full of incredible action sequences and some of the best lightsaber duels in the saga. The last act of the film remains some of my favourite cinema ever. It continually astounds me how Lucas tied so many loose ends down to the finest detail. It's a wonderful payoff for Lucas's original 6-movie saga, and at the time was the perfect way to farewell our beloved franchise. At one point this was very close to the top of my list, however over the years I found it hasn't held up as well for me. Maybe because some of its flaws are more obvious with older eyes. But regardless, the movie is an unabashedly fun Star Wars film and one I still highly enjoy. 6. Return of the Jedi. While the movie has some awesome moments, like the battle on the skiff barge at Jabba's, and the speeder chase through Endor, and the space battle above, the movie has always felt incredibly clunky to me. Maybe it's because it takes a good half hour for the movie to get rolling, or the fact that the pacing and tone shifts quite a bit. Some parts feel lighter and safer, others dark and serious. It doesn't exactly detriment the film, but the constant change of pace does feel slightly awkward. Regardless, Jedi is a fantastic Star Wars movie, and holds some of the greatest character moments and sequences in the entire saga, including that superb final act, which sees the final confrontation between Luke, Vader, and the Emperor. The writing and filmmaking in this sequence is truly something special. The tension is palpable, leaving you on the edge of your seat, hanging on every moment, no matter how many times you watch it, as Luke and Vader confront their past, their future, and their demons, both inside and out, ultimately coming to a head with one of the most satisfying conclusions in cinema history. The movie does have more great moments than bad, but it's the OT installment that I've always felt least connected to. 5. The Phantom Menace. I acknowledge Phantom Menace isn't a great movie, and if I were to rank the Star Wars movies by quality, it probably wouldn't take out such a high place. While in hindsight, Phantom Menace doesn't really feel like a Star Wars movie, when I was a kid, this was Star Wars. Phantom Menace was my first cinematic Star Wars experience, and my first experience seeing anything like it in a cinema. As a kid of 8 years old, the movie was mind-blowing and eye-opening, shaping my love for movies and visual storytelling. It left me asking, how did they do that, and how can I do that? While the film suffers the typical prequel issues, long-winded story, poor script writing, etc, etc, I appreciate the film's efforts. Just as A New Hope changed the face of movies with its groundbreaking visual effects, Phantom Menace laid the groundwork for the next 2 decades of cinema with its groundbreaking computer effects. The movie is big and bold with gorgeous visual and costume design and breathtaking sequences. While as a movie it may not be great, the imagination and desire it sparked in me truly is. 4. The Force Awakens. I'd always felt that the Star Wars saga was perfect after Episode 3. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It had a perfect closure. However, Force Awakens proved that we really only had a beginning and a middle all along. It turned out to be the Star Wars movie I never knew I needed, actually helping to revitalize my love for the franchise, which had slightly waned over the years. Many complain that Awakens recycles the formula of A New Hope, but considering that was a recycled formula to begin with, I found it to be ingeniously the perfect way to not only continue the saga, but reopen it for a new generation. It's fun and exciting and a pure nostalgic ride, seeing old heroes fight alongside new ones. It ties beautifully into the originals and opens organic threads to new mysteries and adventures and addresses those of the past. The movie has a ton of exhilarating sequences and great new characters who I've grown to love deeply. It's a movie that plain and simply feels like Star Wars and one of the franchise's most unabashedly fun and exciting movies. 3. The Last Jedi. Daring, bold, and completely unpredictable, Rian Johnson's entry into the Star Wars saga is one of the biggest and bravest entries in the entire franchise, having the courage to break down expected tropes and conventions, keeping 2 steps ahead of the audience at every turn, daring to do things no one ever anticipated, or at least didn't expect until Episode 9. If Force Awakens was too safe, Last Jedi had to reinvent, and it did so perfectly, allowing the franchise to grow in new directions. Insane action sequences, beautiful and respectful nods and homages to the original movies, and deep philosophical messages and symbolisms make Last Jedi an absolute blast, and a movie that can be continually deconstructed. Last Jedi did things to me emotionally that I hadn't experienced in cinema since I first saw Star Wars almost 2 decades ago. And while some take issue to it, Mark Hamill's moving performance as an aged and bitter Luke Skywalker is a franchise highlight for me. It's a truly original, unique Star Wars adventure and a purely genius piece of cinema that fits so perfectly into the franchise. 2. The Empire Strikes Back. Like Last Jedi, Empire is an incredibly brave movie, one which allowed Lucas to expand his lore and explore darker, more mature themes. Most of the psyche of Star Wars stems from Empire, as the film that breaks apart the saga's characters and explores them in deep, visceral ways in a deeply layered narrative, not only showing the franchise had room to grow, but essentially spawning an entire legacy. As new characters are brought into the fold, Empire boldly splits apart those existing, whose chemistry made the first outing, and takes them onto their own journeys. It's a crazy idea that had never really been done before, but has since become a much repeated trope in film and literary sequels. Empire is the perfect middle act of a story, if we count the original trilogy as a self-contained arc. It addresses plot points from the first and sets up the emotional finale of the next, featuring some of the greatest Star Wars moments ever. The Battle of Hoth, the training sequences on Dagobah, and the Luke vs. Vader fight, which I believe includes some of the best cinematography and sound design in cinema history. It's quite arguably the best Star Wars movie ever, easily the best written, and one of the greatest sequels ever made. However, coming in as my #1 Star Wars movie, I simply can't go past A New Hope. When I think of Star Wars, I think of A New Hope. I think of the first moments I sat to watch the movie on VHS and how my mind was irrevocably shattered. Not only did the movie introduce me to a gang of unlikely heroes and friends who I have loved and adored since I was 8 years old, but it changed the path my life took from that moment forward. It was my introduction to grand storytelling and cinema, the moment I fell in love with them. I can't explain the timelessness and relatability of this tale. Everyone wishes they were these characters and wishes they could go on these adventures. It uses an age-old story formula, but does it so wonderfully, so originally, that it makes for the perfect movie. The story behind the story is just as enthralling too. An independent filmmaker shunned by every studio in town, given the green light to make the most lavish independent film of all time by one producer who kind of believed in his vision. Lucas's tenacity in having to literally invent techniques and devices to tell his story on the screen, his conquering of the cinematic landscape with one small film is truly admirable. Star Wars is more than just a movie to me, and I owe so much to it, to Mr. Lucas, and to everyone who took us on a journey into a galaxy far, far away and returned us as changed people. And at that, it's over to you guys. I want to know, how would you personally rank the Star Wars movies from best to worst? As always, fire away in the comments below, and don't be afraid to share your true opinions. However, I must stress once again, perhaps more strongly than any other ranking videos, please be respectful and considerate to others. These are only movies and we're allowed our own opinions. Play nice. If this is your first time viewing one of my videos and you'd like to see more like it in the future, then please don't forget to hit that big old subscribe button up on your screen, as well as that like button down below for that little extra support. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.